I overheard my wife bragging on the phone. I've got the one thing that keeps him in line. She thought she controlled me with a dark secret from my past. What she didn't know, that secret was a lie, and I had the documents proving it. She spread her poison to friends, neighbors, even my professional contacts. When I finally struck back, she realized too late that quiet men don't break. They plan. My name is Ashton Hayes. I'm 61 years old, and for the past 9 years, I've been married to Diane Ward Hayes, a woman who built her entire career on managing other people's images. What I didn't realize until recently was that she'd been managing mine too, sculpting a narrative that kept me exactly where she wanted me. I was walking past the kitchen that Tuesday afternoon when I heard her voice through the doorway. She had that wireless earbud in again, the one she wore constantly like some kind of corporate badge of honor. Her voice carried that tone, light, confident, almost playful. "Oh, trust me, Val," Diane said, laughing softly. "He's not going anywhere. I've got the one thing that keeps him in line." I stopped mid-step in the hallway, one hand still holding my reading glasses. "He knows what I know," she continued. "And as long as I have that, he stays manageable. It's honestly the smartest insurance policy I've ever had." The voice on the other end, Valerie Grant, her longest-running friend, said something I couldn't make out. But Diane's response was crystal clear. "No, he'll never bring it up," Diane said. "He's too afraid of what people would think. That's the beauty of it. The man spent his whole life building credibility, and I'm the only thing standing between him and losing it all." I didn't move. My pulse didn't even spike. I just stood there in the dim hallway, absorbing every syllable like evidence being logged into a mental filing cabinet. She laughed again, that practiced, social laugh she used at fundraisers and networking events. "Val, I swear, if more women understood leverage, there'd be a lot fewer divorces. You don't leave a man like Ashton. You manage him." I turned slowly and walked back toward my study. My hands were steady. My breathing was controlled. I'd spent decades in patent negotiations and corporate consultations where one misstep could cost millions. I knew how to stay calm under pressure. Inside my study, I closed the door quietly and sat in the old leather chair my father left me. It still smelled faintly of pipe tobacco, even after all these years. I opened the bottom desk drawer, the one with the false panel in the back, and pulled out a brown envelope I hadn't touched in over 2 decades. Federal Clearance Certificate. Ashton Hayes, 1998. Fully exonerated from all allegations of contract fraud following an exhaustive investigation. No wrongdoing. No misconduct. Just a competitor smear campaign that fell apart under scrutiny. I stared at the document, then set it carefully on the desk. She thought she had leverage. She thought wrong. And as I sat there in the fading afternoon light, I realized something I should have understood years ago. Diane hadn't married me for love. She'd married me for control. And now, it was time to take it back. I didn't sleep that night. Not from anxiety, but from clarity. When you finally see the full picture after years of looking at fragments, rest becomes irrelevant. I spent those hours in my study, door locked, desk lamp, casting long shadows across documents I'd kept filed away for decades. The Federal Clearance Certificate was just the beginning. Beneath it lay copies of the investigation report, witness testimonies, and the final judgment that cleared my name completely. The accusations had been fabricated by a rival consulting firm trying to edge me out of a lucrative government contract. When the truth came out, they settled quietly, paid damages, and disappeared into bankruptcy within 2 years. But I never talked about it. Not publicly. Not even with Diane when we first started dating. She'd asked once, early on, something vague about why I left government contract work. I'd said it was complicated and moved on. She must have dug deeper on her own, found the initial allegations, and assumed the worst. Then she weaponized it. At 7 in the morning, I made the call. "Gerald Thompson." The voice answered, rough with sleep. "Gerald, it's Ashton Hayes," I said. There was a pause, then a shift in tone. "Ashton, it's been what, 8 years?" "About that," I said. "I need your help. Legal strategy, not litigation. Not yet, anyway." "I'm listening," Gerald said, suddenly alert. I laid it out in 15 minutes. The overheard conversation, the years of subtle control, the false narrative Diane had been spreading to friends, neighbors, probably colleagues. Gerald listened without interrupting, a skill that made him one of the best attorneys I'd ever worked with. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. You still have the clearance documents? Gerald asked. Right in front of me, I said. Good. Don't move them. I'm coming over this afternoon, Gerald said. Bring everything you've got. Financial records, property documents, anything she signed in the last 9 years. There's a postnuptial agreement, I said. She signed it 5 years ago after my heart scare. Said it was just paperwork to protect both of us. Gerald's tone shifted. Did she read it? She skimmed it, I said. Signed it over wine at the kitchen table. Ashton, Gerald said slowly. Tell me you built protections into that document. I did, I said. She waived rights to any professional income, licensing fees, and intellectual property revenue. It's all in there. There was a low whistle on the other end. She signed away her claim to the Golden Goose and didn't even realize it. That's what I'm hoping, I said. We need to verify the language, Gerald said. If it's as tight as you say, she's already lost this fight. She just doesn't know it yet. I looked at the stack of papers on my desk. What's the next move? We document everything, Gerald said. Every conversation you can remember, every person she told that story to, every time she used your so-called past against you. Then we wait. Let her make the next move. When she does, we'll be 3 steps ahead. She thinks she controls the narrative, I said. She did, Gerald replied. But narratives only work when they're true. And hers just fell apart. After we hung up, I walked to the window and looked out at the garden Diane had redesigned 2 years ago. Expensive stone paths, imported plants, all paid for with money she thought was partially hers. It wasn't. And soon, she'd figure that out. Gerald arrived at 3 in the afternoon, carrying a briefcase that looked like it had survived a war. We sat in my study while Diane was out at one of her networking lunches, the kind where she collected business cards and cultivated influence. First things first, Gerald said, spreading documents across my desk. We need to secure your financial position before she realizes what's happening. I handed him the postnuptial agreement. He read it slowly, occasionally making notes in the margins with a red pen. This is solid, Gerald said finally. She waived all claims to professional income, licensing revenue, and any intellectual property generated during the marriage. Did you draft this yourself? I had help from a business attorney at the time, I said. Diane thought it was just estate planning after my heart issue. She signed without reading it, Gerald stated rather than asked. She was 3 glasses into a bottle of Chardonnay, I said. Kept saying it was just paperwork and that we trusted each other. Gerald smiled grimly. Trust is expensive. She's about to learn that lesson. Over the next 2 hours, we went through everything. Joint bank accounts that I could legally transfer into a trust. Investment portfolios where my name carried the primary authority. The house deed, which was actually held by an LLC I'd formed 6 years ago, with Diane listed only as a resident, not an owner. You build a fortress without her noticing, Gerald said. I built protection, I corrected. I never thought I'd need to use it. But you were smart enough to have it ready, he said. Now here's what happens next. We start moving assets quietly. Nothing dramatic. Nothing she'll notice immediately. Small transfers, account restructuring, password updates. By the time she realizes something's changed, it'll be too late to stop it. What about her accounts? I asked. Leave them alone, Gerald said. Let her think everything's normal. The moment she suspects you're preparing for something, she'll escalate. We want her calm until we're ready. That night, after Diane came home smelling of expensive perfume and talking about some gallery opening, I sat at my computer and began the process. Transferred funds from our joint account to a trust established under the LLC. Updated beneficiary information on my life insurance. Changed passwords on financial platforms to devices she didn't have access to. It took 90 minutes. When I was done, she still had access to her credit cards and the household account. Everything looked normal on the surface. But beneath it, the foundation she thought she stood on had just shifted. She didn't know it yet, but she was already standing on borrowed ground. I closed my laptop and went to bed, sleeping soundly for the first time in weeks. 3 days later, my daughter Rachel called. Dad, she said, her voice careful and measured the way it got when she was working through something complicated. We need to talk. Can I come by tomorrow? Rachel was a corporate attorney, sharp as a blade and twice as careful. If she wanted to talk face to face, it wasn't casual. Tomorrow works, I said. Morning or afternoon? Morning, Rachel said. Before Diane's usual schedule. I'd rather keep this between us for now. She arrived at 9, dressed in business casual, carrying a leather portfolio similar to the one I'd taken to Gerald's office. We sat in the study, door closed. I heard something, Rachel said without preamble, from a colleague whose wife knows Diane socially. She's been telling people you were involved in some kind of fraud case years ago, that you were investigated and barely escaped charges. My jaw tightened, but I kept my voice level. What exactly did she say? Rachel pulled out her phone and read from notes. According to the source, Diane told several people at a charity luncheon that you were investigated for contract tampering in the 90s, that your reputation was destroyed, and that she's the only reason you have any professional credibility left. She said that publicly? I asked. To at least 6 people. Rachel confirmed. One of them was Barbara Hendricks. You remember her? I did. Barbara's husband sat on 2 boards I'd consulted for over the years. How much damage? I asked. Rachel's expression darkened. Potentially significant. Barbara's husband mentioned it to someone on the Riverside Foundation board. They're the ones who hired you last year for the technology patent review. They're questioning my credibility, I said. They're questioning whether to continue the contract, Rachel said. Dad, this isn't just social gossip anymore. This is impacting your professional reputation. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the gardener Diane had insisted we hire was trimming hedges I used to trim myself. Everything in our life had become performative, curated for appearance. I have documentation, I said. Federal clearance from 1998. Full exoneration. Rachel straightened. You have proof she's lying? I have proof the entire story is false, I said. I was investigated, cleared completely, and the accusers were the ones who face consequences. Then why didn't you ever correct her? Rachel asked. I turned to face my daughter. Because I didn't know she was telling the story. I thought she understood what actually happened. Rachel's expression shifted from confusion to anger. She knew the truth and lied anyway. Apparently, I said. My daughter stood, pacing now. Dad, that's defamation. Actionable defamation. If she's damaging your professional reputation with false statements, you have grounds for legal action. I know, I said. I've already started preparing. Rachel looked at me with something between surprise and respect. You're moving against her. I'm protecting what's mine, I said. There's a difference. What do you need from me? Rachel asked. I met her eyes. Help me document everything. Every person she told, every conversation, every instance where this lie spread. We're building a case, and I need it to be bulletproof. Rachel nodded slowly, her attorney mind already working through the strategy. Consider it done. The call came on a Wednesday morning, exactly 9 days after I'd started restructuring everything. I was in the garage, organizing tools I'd accumulated over the years when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Stuart Palmer, Diane's attorney. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Control is often about timing. Ashton Hayes, I said. Ashton, it's Stuart Palmer, he said, his voice carrying that forced professionalism lawyers use when delivering bad news. I'm calling on behalf of Diane. We need to discuss some concerns that have come to light. What kind of concerns? I asked, setting down a wrench. Stuart cleared his throat. She's noticed some irregularities in the financial accounts. Transfers she wasn't aware of. Changes to beneficiary designations. She's understandably worried about what's happening. Everything I've done is legal and within my rights, I said calmly. I'm not suggesting otherwise, Stuart said quickly. But given the length of your marriage and the joint nature of your finances, she feels entitled to some explanation. I walked out of the garage and stood in the driveway, looking at the house Diane thought she co-owned. Stuart, I assume you've reviewed the post-nuptial agreement we signed 5 years ago. There was a pause. A telling one. I have, Stuart said carefully. But Diane contends she didn't fully understand what she was signing at the time. She signed every page, I said. Initiated each clause. The notary can confirm she was coherent and willing. Be that as it may, Stuart continued. There are questions about whether the terms were fairly presented. The terms were clear, I said. She waived rights to my professional income, licensing revenue, and intellectual property. That wasn't hidden in fine print, Stuart. It was the primary purpose of the document. Another pause. Longer this time. Ashton, Stuart said, his tone shifting slightly. What's really going on here? Diane seems to think you've discovered something. She's quite agitated. She should be, I said. I've learned she's been telling people I was involved in criminal fraud, that I was investigated and barely escaped prosecution, that she's the only reason I have any credibility left. The silence on the other end was absolute. Stuart, I continued, I have federal clearance documents proving every word of that story is false. I was investigated, yes. I was also completely exonerated. The people who made the accusations face consequences, not me. And Diane has been using that lie to control me for years. I see, Stuart said quietly. Do you? I asked. Because I'm guessing she didn't mention that part when she hired you. She mentioned a misunderstanding, Stuart said carefully. It's not a misunderstanding when you tell 6 people at a charity luncheon that your husband is a fraud, I said. That's defamation. And it's cost me professional contracts. Stuart was quiet for several seconds. When he spoke again, the professional veneer had thinned considerably. Ashton, I think there may have been some miscommunication about the facts here. I think so too, I said. And Stuart, when this comes out fully, you might want to reconsider your position in this situation. Because she's just learned the truth about herself, not me. I hung up before he could respond. Inside the house, I heard Diane's voice rising from the kitchen, talking rapidly on the phone. She'd gotten the news. The trap had just closed around her, and she was beginning to realize it. 2 days after Stuart's call, something happened that I didn't expect, though perhaps I should have. Brandon, Diane's son, showed up at the house while she was out shopping. He was 26, still living off his mother's money, while calling himself an entrepreneur and lifestyle influencer. His actual accomplishments included dropping out of 2 business programs and burning through $40,000 on a cryptocurrency venture that collapsed in 3 weeks. Ashton, Brandon said as I opened the door, his tone trying for friendly, but landing somewhere near threatening. We need to talk. About what? I asked, not inviting him in. About what you're doing to my mother, he said. She's losing sleep over this. You're freezing her out financially, and I think we both know that's not fair. Fair would have been her not lying about me for 9 years, I said evenly. Brandon's expression hardened. Listen, I don't know what you think you have on her, but you need to back off. Otherwise, things might get complicated for you. I studied him for a moment. Is that a threat, Brandon? It's friendly advice, he said, pulling out his phone. See, I've got some photos here. Pictures of you with a woman who's not my mother. At a restaurant. Looking pretty cozy. He turned the phone toward me. The image showed me sitting across from a woman at an outdoor cafe. It took me half a second to recognize the deception. That's Rachel, I said. My daughter. Your stepsister, technically. Brandon's confidence faltered slightly. Doesn't matter who she is. Point is, it looks bad. And if these accidentally got shared around, people might start asking questions. I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me. Brandon backed up instinctively. Let me explain something to you, Brandon, I said, my voice low and controlled. Those photos are meaningless because anyone with half a brain can verify that's my daughter. But attempting to blackmail me with fabricated evidence, that's actually illegal. I'm not blackmailing anyone, Brandon said quickly. I'm just saying. You're saying you'll spread false implications unless I stop protecting my assets, I interrupted. That's extortion. And I've got our entire conversation recorded on the security camera above the door. Brandon's eyes flicked upward to the camera, then back to me. My son Jack installed that system last month, I said. Video and audio. Crystal clear. Want to say anything else for the record? Brandon's face paled. He pocketed his phone and took another step back. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said. And Brandon, tell your mother that sending you here was a mistake. The next person who tries something like this will be dealing with my attorney, not me. He left without another word, nearly jogging to his car. I went back inside and immediately called Jack. Dad, my son answered. What's up? I need you to pull the security footage from the front door, I said. From about 10 minutes ago. Brandon just tried to blackmail me with fake photos. There was a sharp intake of breath. He what? He implied he had compromising pictures of me, I said. Turned out to be photos of Rachel and me at lunch. He tried to make it seem suspicious. That little. Jack stopped himself. I'll get the footage. You want me to come over? Not yet, I said. But keep that video safe. We're going to need it. After we hung up, I sat in my study and thought about how desperate Diane must be to send her son to threaten me. She was scrambling, making mistakes, and every mistake gave me more ammunition. The quiet dismantling I planned was working exactly as it should. Patricia called on a Thursday evening. I hadn't heard from my ex-wife in almost 3 years. Not since Rachel's birthday dinner, where we'd managed polite conversation for our daughter's sake. "Ashton," Patricia said, her voice steady but carrying an edge I recognized. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago." I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention. "I'm listening." "About 7 years ago, Diane contacted me," Patricia said. "She called me out of the blue. Said she wanted to meet for coffee. Talk about the kids, build a relationship, that sort of thing." I was skeptical, but I agreed. And I prompted. "She offered me money," Patricia said bluntly. $20,000. She said she wanted me to tell Rachel and Jack certain things about you. About your business practices. About why our marriage really ended. She wanted me to make you look unstable, unreliable. My jaw tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I told her go to hell," Patricia said. "Those weren't my exact words, but that was the message. I told her I wouldn't poison our children against their father for any amount of money, especially not with lies." "Did she threaten you?" I asked. "No," Patricia said. She just smiled and said she understood, that she'd find another way. I thought about telling you then, but we weren't exactly on speaking terms, and I figured she'd give up. "She didn't give up," I said. "She just changed tactics." "I know," Patricia said quietly. "Rachel told me what's been happening. The lies Diane's been spreading, the damage to your reputation. Ashton, I'll testify to all of this. I'll put it in writing, sworn statement, whatever you need." Something in my chest loosened slightly. Patricia and I hadn't ended well, but she'd always been honest. Fierce, sometimes difficult, but honest. "Why now?" I asked. "Because those kids deserve better than what I gave them during the divorce," Patricia said. "And because you deserve better than what that woman's doing to you. I failed you once. I won't fail you again." "Thank you," I said simply. "Don't thank me yet," Patricia said. "When this goes public, I'm going to tell everyone exactly what Diane tried to do. She tried to buy false testimony against you from your children's mother. People need to know what kind of person she really is." After we hung up, I sat in the study for a long time. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd anticipated. Diane had built her strategy on manipulation and lies, but every thread was unraveling. Gerald needed to hear about this immediately. Rachel called me 3 days later with news that shifted everything into a higher gear. "Dad," she said, her voice carrying that controlled intensity she used when she'd found something significant. "I've been digging into Diane's charity work. The Hope and Art Foundation she started 4 years ago." "What about it?" I asked. "It's a shell," Rachel said. "I pulled the tax filings. Last year, they claimed $73,000 in donations. Guess how much went to actual charitable programs?" "Tell me," I said. $12,000, Rachel said. "The rest went to administrative costs, salaries, travel expenses, event planning." "Dad," she paid herself $42,000 as executive director of a charity that holds 3 events a year. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. "That's legal." "Technically, yes," Rachel said, "but it's ethically questionable, and donors would be furious if they knew." Most of the money came from people who thought they were funding art programs for underprivileged kids. Instead, it funded Diane's lifestyle. "Can you prove this?" I asked. "Already did," Rachel said. "I've got the 990 forms, the bank statement from the foundation's account. She's listed as a signatory, and receipts showing where the money actually went. Dad, she used charity funds to pay for a trip to Napa Valley. Called it a fundraising expedition. Send everything to Gerald," I said. "Already done," Rachel confirmed. He said this could open her up to IRS scrutiny, possibly fraud charges if it's determined she misrepresented the foundation's purpose to donors. "Good," I said. "There's more," Rachel added. "Brandon's listed as a paid consultant for the foundation. $18,000 last year for social media management." I checked. The foundation's Instagram has 47 followers and hasn't been updated in 8 months. The picture was getting clearer. Diane hadn't just lied about me. She'd built an entire ecosystem of deception, using other people's money and good intentions to fund herself and her son. "Rachel," I said, "you've done excellent work on this. We're not done yet." my daughter said. But we're getting close. She's going to fall hard when this all comes out. I know, I said. And she built every bit of it herself. Diane came to my study on a Thursday evening. I'd been expecting this. Desperation has its own timeline, and hers had just reached critical mass. She stood in the doorway wearing one of her expensive designer outfits, the kind she bought for important meetings. Her makeup was perfect, her hair styled. She was dressed for negotiation. Ashton, she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in years. Can we talk? Really talk? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat down, crossing her legs carefully. I know things have gotten complicated between us, Diane began. And I think maybe we both said things, did things we regret. But we're adults. We can work this out. I said nothing, just watched her. I've been thinking, she continued, about what would be fair for both of us. A clean separation, no drama, no lawyers fighting. I'll walk away quietly. You give me $500,000, and we both move on with our lives. 500,000, I repeated. It's reasonable, Diane said quickly. Given the length of our marriage, what I've contributed to your life, your career, I think it's more than fair. Actually, I could ask for much more. Could you? I asked. Ashton, please, she said, leaning forward. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I know you're angry about some things I said. Maybe I exaggerated a little about your past. People do that. It doesn't have to be this big dramatic thing. Exaggerated, I said flatly. Fine, I was wrong, Diane said, her voice rising slightly. I shouldn't have said those things. But you know how social circles are. People talk. Sometimes you have to embellish to keep up. I didn't mean any real harm. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were printouts of the charity's tax documents, the bank statements showing her personal expenses paid with foundation money, and witness statements from people she'd lied to about me. Diane, I said calmly, you defrauded donors to a charity you created. You paid yourself and Brandon with money people donated for children's art programs. You attempted to bribe my ex-wife to poison my children against me. You've been telling people for 9 years that I'm a criminal when you knew it was false. And you think $500,000 makes this go away. Her face paled. You can't prove any of that. I can prove all of it, I said. Tax documents, bank records, witness statements, recorded conversations. Brandon's attempted blackmail was captured on security cameras. Everything's documented. Diane stood abruptly. You're bluffing. Try me, I said. She stared at me for a long moment. Then her expression changed. The facade of cooperation vanished, replaced by something colder. If you push this, Ashton, I'll destroy you, she said. I'll tell everyone everything. I'll make your life hell. You already tried that, I said. It didn't work. The only person you destroyed was yourself. She walked to the door, then turned back. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said. You just haven't accepted it yet. She left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I picked up my phone and texted Gerald. She just made her final move. Time to respond. His reply came seconds later. Ready when you are. For months later, I stood in my study looking at documents that represented the end of a 9-year mistake. The divorce was finalized. Diane had signed everything 3 weeks ago, her attorney having finally convinced her that fighting would only make things worse. She'd walked away with nothing. The post-nuptial agreement held up perfectly in court. She had no claim to my professional income, my licensing revenue, or the house. Her attorney had tried to argue she'd been coerced, but the notary's testimony destroyed that argument in minutes. The charity fraud investigation was ongoing. The IRS had gotten involved after Rachel submitted the documentation. Diane was facing potential charges, and several major donors had already filed civil suits. Her reputation in Portland's social circles was demolished. Brandon had disappeared to Seattle, supposedly working on a new venture. Translation: hiding from his mother's implosion and trying to rebuild his life away from the wreckage. Rachel and Jack had both called that morning to check on me. You doing okay, Dad? Jack had asked. Better than okay, I'd told him honestly. The house felt different now. Quieter, but in a peaceful way. I'd removed all of Diane's designer touches, the expensive art she'd insisted on, the furniture that was more about image than comfort. It felt like my space again. Patricia had stopped by last week, the first time she'd been to the house since the divorce was final. We'd sat in the kitchen drinking coffee like old acquaintances who'd survived the same war. "You look good, Ashton," she'd said. "Lighter somehow." "I feel lighter," I'd admitted. "Like I've been carrying something heavy for years and finally put it down." "The kids are proud of you," Patricia said, "for standing up to her, for not letting her win." "I didn't do it to win," I said. "I did it because it was right." Now, standing in my study, I thought about what Gerald had said when the divorce was finalized. "You played this perfectly. Patient, methodical, and you let her defeat herself." He was right. I hadn't needed to be aggressive or vindictive. I just needed to be prepared and wait for the truth to surface. Diane had built her empire on lies and manipulation, and when the foundation collapsed, she collapsed with it. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Dinner Sunday? Jack and I want to celebrate with you." I smiled and typed back, "I'll be there." I looked around the study one more time. My father's share, the books I'd collected over decades, the patent certificates on the wall from inventions I'd actually created. This was real. This was earned. Diane had thought she could control me with a fabricated story about my past. Instead, she taught me something valuable. Quiet strength defeats loud manipulation every single time. You just have to be patient enough to let it play out. I closed the folder containing the divorce papers and filed it away. That chapter was finished. Time to write the next one. And this time, I'd be the only author.